everyone. I'm excited to share part 3 of my series about all this change you've heard in the real estate market. And again, most of it's been fake news, so I'm breaking down all of this into 4 sections so that we can get the accurate information out there. If you'll remember in my previous sections, I told you a little bit about what all the change was and what some of the fake news was. And then I talked to you as if you were a seller and what it meant to you in our listing agreements and how they changed. On this episode, number 3, I'm going to cover what does it look like for you as a buyer, what are the forms that are now used, and what does the change mean to you. So let me start with a recap of the change. Number 1 change was co-broke information of what some co-broke agent was going to be paid, i.e. buyer's agent was going to be paid per listing, has been removed from the MLS. Number 2 change that came about is simply that if you're going to look at property, you have to sign a buyer's agreement now. Now, the state of Texas says you must be represented. So with that, let's talk about buyer's representation. We've always had this buyer's agreement, the long form. It comes with 5 pages that spells out our obligations, fiduciary interest to you, and what yours is to us, and how we get paid. That's never changed. Now, news would have it is that's never been discussed. Unfortunately for some, that's probably true. In our company, it's always been discussed because we always have you sign a buyer's agreement. In the buyer's agreement, it spells out the fee we get paid and how we get paid. And so I'm going to point out the section and then we'll have this for you to look at directly, but it's underneath broker compensation. And in that section, it breaks down our fee, when it's payable, and how it gets paid. Typically, the first mode of us collecting a fee on the buyer side was to go to the listing agent and get what the co-broke fee was. Well, we no longer know what that is without asking. So now we have to pick up the phone and ask them if they're offering a co-broke fee. That's change number 1. Change number 2, our fee that's in the buyer's agreement is what you have agreed to pay. So if the co-broke fee is less, then you could be responsible for the difference. That actually has always been in the buyer's agreement. It's not something new. Number 3 is if co-broke doesn't pay it and the seller doesn't pay it or the builder doesn't pay it, then you are left to pay it. We always seek the fee from the other side first. That's even in a for sale by owner, and most of that just comes from good negotiation. So it's really important to have a great agent that understands this process. Now, it is fine for you to ask when any property you go to write an offer on is, am I going to be responsible for any part of this fee? Now, the only other change that came about in the buyer's agreement that was not there before or in our rules was if we were to receive a bonus or any other applicable fees, that we could do that. Now we cannot charge more or receive more than what is in our buyer's agreement. So let me give you a very good example of that. Often, builders pay incentives for agents to come show the new homes as well. They will pay a bonus. We've always been allowed to receive those. The only difference is you additionally have to sign that bonus can be received if it is greater than the fee in our buyer's agreement. Hopefully that makes sense. It is truly very simple. It's just that we cannot receive more than what's in our buyer's agreement without written approval. Now that should have been that way all along. Builders do disclose and make sure that the buyer knows that their agent is being paid a fee. That's always been in builder paperwork as well, and you as a buyer have always signed that. Now, to summarize all of that, it also comes back to this change. You cannot go look at a property without an agent discussing how they get paid. You must sign a buyer's agreement with them if they're going to open the door. So they did come up with a shorter form, especially for those of you that don't have relationships with the buyer already, that says, I'm going to see if I like you. It's what I call the dating form. And I agree that if I buy this property, I will pay you. And it has less information in it and obligations by all parties than what the long form has. Now, once you've signed a short form, if you stay with an agent, you do need to transfer that to a long form, because that's really what spells out the obligation of all parties and so forth. With this, I'll end with a simple reason of why do you want to use a real estate agent to purchase a property and not just go direct to a listing agent who cannot represent you. And I'm going to say this clearly. A listing agent cannot represent you. They can do intermediary, where they treat all parties the same and mediate between the two, but they can't solely represent you like a buyer's agent does. So, under buyer representation, the agent is allowed to pull comparable sales, give you advice on if the property's listed too high, if it's a good deal, look at other information we have access to that you don't have access to that might tell us red flags about the property. We can talk to you about the listing history of the property. And we can help you with seller's disclosure notices, review those, previous inspections, and talk to you from our experiences of dealing with these properties in the marketplace. We also are working on your best behalf. So we negotiate in that way too. And we've been doing this a long time. This is what we do for a living. So we can definitely set the tone for better negotiations than if you go direct. It just helps avoid the conflict most people do not like to experience in direct negotiation. In addition to that, we offer a lot of other services to you as a buyer's agent that takes you through the process and protects your largest asset. That's just a high-level highlight of the things we do as a buyer's agent. I know for many of you, you were thankful you had us as a buyer's agent. There is value in having one. We, as good buyer's agents, must negotiate our fee. We've always done that, and now those that are really good at their job will continue to do that. That's going to be the difference when picking a buyer's agent. Those that are good at their job and those that aren't, you might find yourself paying a fee. So hopefully I've answered all your questions about the changes and buyer's agreements. Really, they haven't changed much. I think the biggest thing is in the change for the buyer's agreements is we can't get paid more than what we agreed to. We can get paid less, but we can't get paid more. And if we get paid more, you have to agree to it. That is really the only change. It was always out there that if you went to work with an agent, they needed to be representing you and going through the buyer's agreement. Unfortunately, that is not the case in all states and not the case with all agents. So now, when they tell you, if you want me to open the door, I need to send you an agreement, you will understand why. Thanks for joining me on this part 3. And if I can answer any questions at all, or you're thinking about buying a house, give us a call. We'd be glad to help you. We know how to represent you correctly.